tips about how do you attend the event, like you mute your phone, turn off your email, and which browser you should use, and also where's the program, and also like where you can find the things that you want to find. And so they keep engaging their audience like before the event. So I think that's actually also a good best practice that we would recommend. And one more thing, actually, a lot of I would say like hybrid event right now have changed the way how they run it is by not just having the live version, but they also have the on-demand versions. That means like actually like today. So after we run this event, so we can actually turn this into a video format that people can revisit the video content that we have today, and as a post-event, I would say long tail effect that you can create for your event. So around 95.5% actually, people believe that on-demand is actually helpful, and around 80% of them think it's actually reaching to a wider audience. For us is a real example. So last time when we did the event trend in Asia, there's around like 33 country um, um, attendees. So that means like they are from everywhere, no matter on Asia. Actually, it's like everywhere. So they actually join the virtual event from different part of the world. So in the past, when we do physical event, then it's actually very limited. So people won't fly there. And today we have a speaker actually joining in from Singapore. So virtual event actually make it simpler for audience like that. And from now on, actually, to be frank, for us, we actually will be ourselves. We will invest probably like 80% of the event will be on virtual, and 20% will be on physical. Because like virtual, we can invite a speaker from all around the world, and we have had audience from all around the world. We can serve more people, and for the same content, but we can actually help more people to get the knowledge. And so we find it much more powerful than the physical event that we have done. So that's actually from our personal experience. And I think that's for go back to the audience is so the question for you guys today is, so during the last few months, have you noticed any shift? And for you, actually, is that the same, that the diversity of the attendee, is it from more countries like what we experience, or actually it's more a closer group? So for you, do you have a more diverse background or diverse audience for your events? So there's like a few choices here, much more diverse, just like no notable shift, or actually less diverse, or less audience. So let's give probably like maybe 5 seconds for the audience to vote. And during this like time, so for us actually, I will share, we experience a much bigger audience and much diverse background. So we have actually last time we have people joining from Japan, Korea, Singapore, Malaysia, even Thailand. Some country actually I never visited before. Some of them are from like Pakistan, and so it's like pretty amazing group. So let's see the result and see how the audience is feeling. So I think around 55% is more diverse, and much more diverse is 19%. So I think we will be fall into the much more diverse category. And no notable shift is around 20%. So most of it actually, close to 70% of you experience actually more diverse background from the audience for your events. So that's actually interesting to know. And so last is about like some of the other company, how they're running events. So this is more a trade show example. So they for Reed Exhibition, they're one of the largest in Japan. That they run trade shows that basically in different industry like food, IT, home gift, and all this area. And so one thing that actually they utilize a lot is business matching. So that's actually it works pretty well in virtual world. So when we work with them, so because they have so many, I think a few hundred to sometimes thousand exhibitors, and maybe thousands to tens of thousands audience. So because they need to match the audience with the buyer and seller, and so they allow them to have a platform. They book each other's time slot, and so they can pick the date, they can pick a time, and actually they have a hybrid element. So all the event that you just saw here is actually hybrid. So they have physical show and they have online. And how they did it is like when they do the business matching. So they did two things. One is they allow you to choose whether you want to meet physical or virtual. So I can pick a date, which is like, let's say today, 12 o'clock. And then I can pick whether I meet you physically or video call. So they actually have a capability, let the business matching happen online. But you can also meet the person physically. So that's one of the example how they run the hybrid events. And PwC, it's actually pretty interesting that they are using it for kind of like hiring and HR purpose. So they have an exhibition, which is a career fair. So they allow the people, like the registration form, when you register on the registration form, they allow people to upload their CV. And actually, in during the if you go back to the virtual platform right now, you can also send the name card to each other, and they allow the candidate to send CV to also to the maybe the company or to department that they want to apply. So this is like, for example, assurance departments, then you can send your CV to them, and then immediately you can do a video call as a kind of interview. So you can collect all the attendee documents at the same time. And that's like one of the example we see the shift, not just event or marketing industry, like somehow the HR and hiring is also shifting to virtual. And one last example I want to give you is on the um, live streaming. So Tesla and NIO. So Tesla definitely, like everybody knows, is an electric car company, and NIO is a competitor actually of Tesla that they do electric car in China. And so both of them actually leveraging live streaming to boost their sales and during the pandemic. And how they did it is actually Tesla, they just like do a live streaming show. And it was around like, they book around 2,500 test drive in just one live streaming event. That's actually more than like almost like close to weeks or to months test drive for them. And you can see that they are just like doing live streaming, and then people actually immediately book the could be the test drive on in Shanghai. And NIO, which is their competitor, actually even generates sales. Around $18 million sales from the live streaming. So they actually, this is how they did it. This is the founder of the NIO, and they invite like, could be celebrities, could be like real user, and they do live streaming immediately to boost the awareness and also sales, and they really make sales. So that's actually, the world is shifting, and why I'm giving all this example is today, although we are talking about events, but actually not just the event industry, but a lot of like even sales, HR industry is shifting to leveraging new technology like live streaming, and also could be on hiring. So we see this trend in a lot of our users, our customers, or other platform that people are leveraging. So we want to share some of the trend to you so that you know. I want to advocate so that you know actually that's how some of the industry is using it, and you can also think about how you can use it in your industry. So I think I would conclude it here that on the top left, you can see that's how we used to run events. Some of the event will still stay in physical like that, but new technology like live streaming, video conferencing, like what Tony Robbins is doing for the whole virtual event, that's a real event, so it's not a fake photo. And so that is like, could be very smooth, and it's exactly how we are running event with all of the audience today right now. And in the future, you can see VR and some new technology will be applied to the event industry. So I hope this to give you a very high level glimpse of how the event or marketing industry will head in, and how the technology will collide with this industry. And I hope it gives you some insight on where to move to the next strategy. And later, we actually have a lot more really exciting speaker that they will share with you some of the trend that they see from the other side. We are sharing it from the technology side, and they are on the execution, on the branding side, and I really look forward to their sharing also. So thank you all for joining today. And so the next speaker, I will let the MC to introduce them.
Awesome. That was really interesting, Sam. Thank you. In the second part of our webinar, our guest speaker, Ian Bell, will give us his appraisal of the event industry before, during, and after the pandemic. So Ian is the head of events programming for Haymarket Media Group and has considerable experience in moderating and hosting finance-related events. Before Haymarket, he worked at The Economist as a senior program editor, writing content for events on a wide array of issues, from climate change to fintech and cardiovascular health to technological innovation. He has an undergraduate degree in ancient history from the University of Nottingham and a postgraduate degree in management from Warwick Business School. So over to you, Ian.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you, Car. I would actually disagree with the audience on the first poll, as I think that sports events and music festivals will come back first, actually. But my name is Ian Bell. I look after the events for Haymarket's 4 brands in Asia. They are Campaign Asia, Finance Asia, Asian Investor, and Corporate Treasurer. Before that, I was a senior program editor at The Economist newspaper, always based in Hong Kong. I've always been involved with writing and producing events, so very much a content background. And I've been in the industry for about 7 years now. And it was always really similar up until March. Content changes, sure. The format broadly stays the same. And I've been in sales pitches, a little bit more sophisticated, but broadly the same. Venues the same. Technological advancements, a little bit here and there, but broadly the same. And then everything changed when the pandemic broke last February in Asia and around the world in March. And today, what I'm going to share with you are my thoughts on the future of the corporate events industry. I need to clarify first that these are not my opinions and aren't reflective of Haymarket or any other firm. I'm going to share with you. One thing to note, actually, based on Sum's presentation there, is that none of my events are consumer-driven. Either. I'll touch on them, but they're not trade shows. They're not marketing events. They're not sports or musical festivals. They are corporate B2B content-driven events, which range from the sub 100 to the small 1000s in attendance. So bear in mind that my comments today have been framed by that context. I do think it's extremely important to understand, if we are going to understand, what will change when we finally emerge from a COVID-ridden world. We must go back a little bit further to understand where the events industry was before the lockdowns and the travel bans and the closures of venues and the mass testings and the absence of any form of human-to-human contact, save from with our partners or our friends or our children. And if we're really honest with ourselves, and I'm sure the corporate events attendees in the audience may disagree with this, but if we're really honest with ourselves, I think the events industry was struggling before COVID-19 ravaged the world. Save from a few major and innovative and rapid growing, everyone paying events that were sort of created by industry insiders and ones which grew phenomenally quickly. Fresh ideas were pretty hard to come by. Trade shows, presumably the hardest hit by the pandemic. The established ones had relied on the calendar event factor for business to be done and had done for some time. The hard work for building these major events had often already been done. Speakers were a little bit repetitive, content a little bit unimaginative, but the risk was small. And that's why you were able to repeat the same event every year, essentially. As long as new business could come in from firms who could be convinced that ROI existed, everything was fine. Smaller, more like the ones I helped create, was similarly at Crossroads. Fresh ideas and formats were often constrained by budget issues. Revenue for some time, it seemed, had become harder and harder to find. The industry-wide inertia was looming, and it was very difficult to uproot. And then the pandemic hit. And again, if we're honest with ourselves, there was probably a little tiny bit of relief that we could postpone events from June, and then again, when June came by, to September. The hard work could be done in the meantime, and we could make much better events with that extra lead time, that very precious concept that we never seem to ever have enough of. But when we realized in June that September wasn't going to work, that inertia really changed to fear. The pandemic really shook the industry into being scared. Fear of salary cuts, fear for jobs, fear even of office closures, all of which has come true to a varying degree for many organizations whose revenue was majorly sourced from live events. So we all started testing virtual events. The first real challenge there was to convince clients of their merit. Some clients were keen, others weren't initially at all. And the cynic in me would say that virtual offerings really became successful because clients had money to spend on marketing that they would lose if they didn't spend it. Certainly that was the case at the beginning, and I don't think it warranted this sort of industry pat on the back that we've all seen on LinkedIn feeds. Yet clients started to get more comfortable with sponsoring virtual events, and the grind, the daily grind for event organizers came back, and we were all delighted that it was back. And they really started to work. It became clear to me, I can't remember the exact time, but it became clear to me that there are many aspects of virtual events that make them preferable to their physical cousins. Number one, margins are much higher. Number two, the risks of launching a successful event, which we believe has longevity, and we always do, is much lower, given the lower costs involved and the potential of editorial repurposing of content should they not work. And number three, global speakers are undoubtedly easier to confirm, as some has already said. And number four, actually, audiences are larger and more geographically diverse. Undoubtedly true. I was actually really surprised to see how low they're scored in the polls. So portfolios of virtual events were created, and that is where we find ourselves now. And once we all learned how to host successful virtual events, mass vaccines are suddenly in play, and change is again on the horizon. Hope for normality in society and in our personal lives has returned, but clients are now unsure again where to allocate their spend again. Keep on with virtual or wait until physical events are back. As an event producer, this is arguably quite frustrating, actually. I could easily make the argument that I would never want physical events to come back. Our audience is small, focused, and senior. From a financial perspective, at least, virtual events are pretty solid. But as events professionals, we do not get to decide the future. We must follow the whims of our clients and of our audiences. The question is, what is the future for corporate events for them and not for us? Each audience and each client are different, so we cannot really give a definitive answer to that question. What is the norm in some markets, in some industries around which virtual events or physical events anchor themselves? Some cultures are rarely the same. But we can still explore three scenarios, I would say, based on data and assumptions that will help us to determine the likelihood of what's happening in the future. These scenarios are binary, but they will give us the perspective to strategize prudently. Number one, there is a dramatic reduction in physical events. So event providers like EventX are building new businesses in facilitating customer engagement. Before the pandemic, we relied entirely on face-to-face introductions, at least at events. It would have been considered strange to tour around an exhibition hall in a virtual setting. No one would have done it. Time will tell whether virtual meetings can have the same effect as physical ones, but what is certainly true, events looking to push their message to their customer base can now track the engagement levels and the reach of their engagement in a much more clinical way than in the past. And the data supports this. According to Gartner, a research and advisory firm, 80% of B2B sales interactions between suppliers and buyers are expected to occur in digital channels by 2025. It's not that far off. With that in mind, how could I challenge the perception that there will be a reduction in physical events? And how could I challenge the fact that industry events might go the same way as cold calling or cold emailing? And what's more, the markets seem to, in part at least, endorse this. There are a number of IPOs happening in the pipeline, in the global pipeline, which do indicate a genuine step change is taking place if we look at the flow of capital in the sector, and that we must do. There are arguments to move away permanently from live events are as follows. Number one, live events have limited engagement with regional or global audiences. Number two, live events lack effective insights into converting prospects into leads. And number three, live events are unable to offer behavioral insights to personalized follow-up. Are these true? They probably are true. Are they solved by virtual events? Doubtfully. For these reasons. One, this is from my perspective as a corporate events producer, but we can try as hard as we like to engage our audience through virtual events, but we can never know how fully engaged they are. Feedbacks are rarely filled out, in any event format. Number two, a number of our clients have not got better leads from virtual events. Some have, sure, but some haven't from virtual events over their physical counterparts. It's a colder approach to email someone you've never met on the back of their attendance at a virtual event. Pretty much end of story. And number three, personalized follow-up is pointless if the recipient doesn't know who the salesperson is, and it's made even harder if you are competing with 20 sponsors, for instance. So for these reasons, a virtual-only model won't happen, or a mainly virtual model won't happen. The clients, in my perspective, don't want it. The audience of our readers don't want it. And as much as there is a financial argument from the likes of me to keep them going, we must follow our clients and our audience, not our own opinions. That's the first scenario. Number two is that virtual events disappear. There's talk of a roaring 20s, a rebound of social interaction not seen before since the 1920s, when the world recovered from the Spanish flu. A world, therefore, where people will be comfortable to fly for business again. Why then would anyone want to dial into a virtual event? In this scenario, if you imagine the strength of this rebound, there would be physical events going on in every market and every geography and every industry in the world because of thirst for human contact. Clients have told us that they are looking forward, they're desperate for physical events to come back. I cannot argue with that, and it should be taken seriously by the industry, even if that industry is hopeful that their new offerings will be enough to sustain their businesses. Trade shows in this regard rebound. I've not seen any evidence that people genuinely prefer a virtual trade show and a virtual exhibition hall over a physical one. In this scenario, the new industry provides, well, the new industry that virtual events provide, they need to seriously consider how they add value to the sector where B2B is the driving force in accordance to this changing customer demands. So number three, and that's the hybrid model. So the bigger question for me and for everybody else who look at virtual events from the corporate perspective is that, is it natural for human beings and business people to want to meet only over Zoom? The answer is no. But if technology can help expand our reach virtually, then why not? So what does a hybrid model actually look like? My 2 cents are, by the way, that the hybrid model should have been in place before the pandemic, but it's extremely easy for me to say that with hindsight. But the hybrid model, the one of the future, in post-COVID, will be a feature in the vast majority of events around the world, but not perhaps, in my opinion, at least, to the same degree as people think. In my opinion, the platform costs will be cheap. No one but the very biggest spenders will pay big bucks for top venues and flashy virtual platforms. I think also changes that will occur from the perspective of trade publications like the ones I work for, and the major players second. So the market changes that's coming for trade publications is that we will scale back on our virtual spend. We will use low-cost providers for our virtual registration system, which can pair with Zoom or something else like its equivalent, because that's all we need. That and a solid speaker lineup from people overseas who we've identified as global leaders in the field, dipping in and out of the discussions. But we already do that. Admittedly, we will probably be running 1 or 2 major flagship virtual events only a year to keep our global presence growing, to get the people we cannot get to speak at physical events and build those relations and relationships that might turn good in a few years' time. The major players will still want to create an enticing virtual offering, but it won't be the same as now. It won't build on a model that has been picked up by trade shows now. It doesn't need to be the same. It'll likely be a catalog of on-demand content, nullifying the need for an online exhibition, because they will have that in person already. I say this because it's incredibly important that we all look at the benefit of, or the benefit to, an event organizer's audience and client base in a world where we presume international travel is resumed. As we all hope and expect it will be soon. I mean, country events, no need for virtual offerings. Sponsors want to fly in and meet with buy-side people of any ever given country. That's why they back these events. Regional and thematic events, yes, but let's get those who can't fly to listen in and to speak. Do we need to do it live? Not necessarily, but if we do, that's fine, stream it. But neither of those things are of high cost. Global hub events, the real senior audience who attend calendar events are only there to meet people. Yes, we'll amplify the content around the world, but that's cheap. Trade shows, on the assumption that international travel is back, then boom, back in business. Do they need a virtual exhibition room in a virtual hotel lobby? I'm not sure. What I do find extremely interesting is how fast firms like EventX were and how innovative they were in developing a very much needed platform in record time. And judging by some global IPO prospectuses that I've read, made a lot more money than what they were doing before. But what's more fascinating is how I'm going to enjoy seeing whether they ensure value is added to event organizers in the corporate space in the future, and how they do that and how they keep doing it. So my time, I think, is almost up. So I'm going to conclude now with maybe 4 recommendations that have come from the industry's past, present, and future that I think will decide its success and the success of every party in the industry in the near term. Number 1, a culture of inertia and comfort destroys businesses. A load of industry players have suffered tremendously through this, and the market has consolidated significantly. The change on the horizon will make that happen again, I'm sure of it. To those organizers which have been successful, and to those firms which have been successful regardless of your involvement in the events industry, keep doing what you were doing. Audience or customer focused, benefit driven events. The marketplace is smaller now, and it has shown the industry what quality really looks like. Keep moving fast. Speed is going to be everything. No one can afford to react slowly to the upcoming changes. Number two, the marketplace will be different from what you hope. Whether you are a virtual event provider, an event organizer, a venue, or whatever, the market is going to change, not always in the ways that you want. And it will be a very uncomfortable year. Not necessarily financially, but psychologically, I think we're in for a tough ride where our risks might not work, where there's no real smooth sailing, not for a while at least, just more uncertainty. So in whatever you do, define how you add value to your clients and audience. Suppress the stress and keep calm and act. Number three, the value proposition of events companies has changed. Content producers or content first event producers know that in order to attract an audience, they need better speakers than their competitors, a better program than their competitors, a better database than their competitors, a better way of connecting with their audience than their competitors. And these always have been the core principles of any content-driven events business, but they have been magnified in this pandemic. Everything else can be cut. We've proved that. Bells and whistles, not always necessary when you have what I've just mentioned. We're a much leaner industry now. We've had to be, and service providers and stakeholders need to understand that. Number four, don't, and this is the final one, don't make assumptions based on your own past experience, your own proficiency to react to change, or the opinions of others. Anything that can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. You don't know. You don't know where your clients are going to take you. Your business models will change. Again, the change coming now will likely be harder than the pandemic. And that is terrifying, quite frankly. And you have to be, in order to survive and succeed, led by your audience and clients. Let them drive you, as you should have always done, but we haven't always done that. And act as nimbly and as ferociously as you did when the pandemic disrupted everything. And you'll be absolutely fine. And that's all I really wanted to say. And I thank you very much indeed for your time. I do think that I have time for a few questions, assuming there are some. I saw a few come in. But if not, I hope you enjoyed my little talk. And thank you again to EventX for inviting me today. I think these types of events are extremely important to share our fears, but also our hopes and our strategies. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. It's a very informative and actually really analytical view. And thank you again for your sharing. And I also put down quite some notes here. And actually, you're having a lot of questions to answer. Actually, not more than
Nice.
4. So I will pass it on to Carl for the question and Q&A sections.
Definitely, Ian. That was really insightful. So if you want to ask a couple of questions, just raise your hand in the Q&A section. Otherwise, I've been going through the chat and I've seen quite a lot of questions. So I'm going to pick one at random. The first one is from Michael Dacey. He says, with the proliferation of online events, we are seeing a drop in standard. Does this make it harder to keep rate cards healthy? And do you think there's a webinar fatigue setting in?
I actually love the drop in standard. I love it because it gives quality event producers the opportunity to show how much better they are than their competitors, and therefore the rate card is completely justified. I think that people were really fast to lower their prices, and I think that's made them suffer a little bit because the clients were asking them, everybody else is. But the trick there was to keep the quality high so that you didn't need to do that. And you're yielding results now because the margins are so low.
Perfect. The second question is from Alan Toe. So he asks, in a B2B conference, what's your advice to engage with clients who attend the conference virtually?
I mean, I think that there has to be a little bit more flexibility in terms of not necessarily profiling sponsor speakers, but giving them space on the agenda that they're able to get their message across. It's crucial to speak to them beforehand. So in the lead up to the event, you must speak to your sponsor speakers so that you get an understanding as to what they want to speak about, and you can deliver that in an editorial friendly way that you know is going to benefit the audience. Because there rarely are cases of a sponsor having nothing to say to an audience, because they wouldn't be in that industry if that were the case. So I think ensure that their content is delivered in a way that the audience will appreciate it. Or to give them feedback. It's very important that sponsors now supply speakers who are charismatic and who can actually deliver their message in a confident way that will impress the audience. So you must let them know that they have to do that. You must, I mean, small things as well. You must let them, you must vet their presentations if it is a presentation, because you need to do things, tiny things like make sure the font platform and that it's not too long, etc., etc. Depending on your strategies around data, you might want to, it depends on the size of your package, but you might want to offer one-on-one introductions as a follow-up that you wouldn't have done before, so you can build a bit of value into that package as well.
Perfect, perfect. I think we have time for one or two more questions. The next one is, do you see any country-to-country differences in their adoption of virtual